think there are any circumstances under which this would be justified, because they've talked about the childcare issue, they've talked about the fact that they had a specific issue that they feared that they were both going to be ill, there wasn't going to be someone to look after their son, they did what they thought was necessary, and the Prime Minister is happy with that explanation.
Well, as a parent, I'm sure all parents watching this can have sympathy with that dilemma, but the Prime Minister's instruction to the country could not have been clearer: stay at home. And if there were problems, there were family members in London, friends in London, local services, the voluntary sector who could have helped, he could have reached out to them. And I'm afraid the failure of the Prime Minister to act on this is undermining the Prime Minister's own authority to lead the country during this crisis and the coronavirus pandemic. It's bringing the Prime Minister's own judgment into question. So, the millions of people who've made these sacrifices, who will be astonished that the Prime Minister hasn't acted, indeed quite angry that the Prime Minister hasn't acted, they'll be wanting the Prime Minister to act today. Dominic Cummings should have gone yesterday. He must go today.
Do you think there's any suggestion, though, there are those people who are making political points out of this? There are those people who don't like Dominic Cummings and will be using this as an excuse to stir up trouble to get him out. The Prime Minister's been quite clear about the fact that he doesn't believe that any of the rules have been broken.
This isn't about politics, it's actually about public health. We're in the midst of the biggest public health crisis this country has ever seen. And the messages that come from the very top, from the Prime Minister, are crucial in helping the country defeat this appalling illness. And if those messages are undermined by the Prime Minister himself, then that will hurt our national effort against coronavirus. Already the government, frankly, has been pretty shambolic in testing, in getting PPE to frontline staff in our NHS and our care homes. They've failed to stop the tragedy happening in our care homes, so that the government's record isn't very good. They need to move on from Dominic Cummings by getting rid of him so they can focus on the real issues and sorting this mess out. And I'm afraid, while Dominic Cummings is still in place, the government's ability to lead, the Prime Minister's ability to lead, is brought into question.
I mean, Ian Blackford, you're on the Isle of Skye for us this morning, and of course, you were as the sort of the SNP Westminster leader will know what it's like to have a number of MPs that look to you for guidance, and that's what the Conservatives are looking at this morning. We've had Gavin Williamson talking elsewhere about the fact that Boris Johnson has been assured by Dominic Cummings about exactly what went on, and trusts what he has said, that he didn't break any rules. Yesterday, he said he acted legally, he acted responsibility, and he acted with integrity as well. What's your reaction?
Oh, really? I mean, the point is, I think we've put legitimate questions to the Prime Minister about what has happened here, and it was a absolutely shambolic press conference from the Prime Minister yesterday. We didn't get any of the facts, and it's as simple as this, that what has happened here has undermined the public health message, that Dominic Cummings can do what he likes based on his instinct, not based on the regulations that are in place, which are very clear. And that is that if you have COVID-19, you're supposed to isolate. Who in their right mind would think that you should be jumping in a car, driving a distance of 260 miles to elderly relatives, when Boris Johnson himself made it absolutely crystal clear that grandparents should not be exposed to grandchildren? And this whole issue,
I think the point that you're making is who in their right mind would do that. Clearly somebody who felt like that was the only alternative that they had. They have specific childcare requirements, and they were both very worried about how ill they would become. So, there was obviously a motivating factor, surely.
Well, I'm not sure that stacks up, because from what we understand, it was the parents that were still looking after their young child. So I'm not sure that actually squares with what we know. I mean, of course, if they'd stayed in London, did they not have friends and relatives that could have been able to support them? This is entirely bogus. The fact of the matter here is that Dominic Cummings has broken the regulations, and he is the senior advisor to the Prime Minister. He is responsible for much of what the government does. He should have done the right thing and recognised that he was in the wrong. The public sightings that we know about at Barnard Castle really rub insult into injury as to what was going on here. This is a man who is at the highest level of government, that advises the Prime Minister, that has broken the lockdown rules, that should have resigned. And the Prime Minister's judgment is now in question, because he should have removed Dominic Cummings on the basis of what we know. And I can tell you that after the press conference last night, that the emails that MPs are getting, and we're all talking to each other, we're being deluged by emails from people, not just in my own constituency, right across the United Kingdom, actually many Conservatives that are really angry, people that want to be able to grieve with their families, people that want to see their grandchildren, but they have respected the rules that are in place.
Okay.
We can't have a situation that there's one rule for those in government and one rule for the rest of us. It's not good enough, and people simply won't accept this.
Well, let's bring in the Shadow Community Secretary, Steve Reid, who also joins us from South London this morning. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. So do you think that Dominic Cummings should be sacked, should resign as a consequence of this? I mean, when we look at the situation, there have been other MPs, Stephen Kinnock amongst them, for example, who have done some sort of breach, not been whiter than white when it comes to these rules and the regulations. What do you think should happen as a consequence of this?
Well, the material difference is that Dominic Cummings helped set the rules that he has now breached. And the rules at the time that he made this 260-mile journey were very clear. Leaving your home, the place you live, to stay at another home is not allowed. And millions of people up and down the country, in very tragic circumstances, have sacrificed so much to follow those rules because they believed rightly that they were helping to save lives. You know, people have not gone to the funerals of loved ones who have passed away. People have not gone to say goodbye to dying relatives. Now, you can't have a situation where it's one rule for the government and another rule for everybody else. And this now goes to the moral authority of the government to expect the public to continue following the guidelines they set. It's critical that moral authority is restored, and for that to happen in these circumstances, I'm afraid Mr Cummings needs to go.
Ed Davey, is there any way back here? I mean, we can see what Steve Reid's saying there, that Dominic Cummings has to go. How does Boris Johnson rescue this situation?
He rescues it by acting and by asking Dominic Cummings, telling Dominic Cummings he has to go. We are in the midst of a public health crisis. Public health messaging to the people of Britain is crucial, and it has to come from the top and be adhered to at the top. And their failure to do that, I think, is angering millions of people. As Steve just said, sacrifices people have made, not going to the funerals, not seeing their loved ones, not seeing their grandchildren. This is the reality of people abiding by the rules. And when the Prime Minister's closest advisor is being let off from a clear breach, that is a disaster for our public health messaging. And I've been interested in seeing that the experts and the scientists who've been advising the government on how to message, on how to influence behaviour during this public health crisis, they have been critical of the Prime Minister failing to act. And I would call on Conservative MPs. Some of them have put their head above the parapets, and I salute their bravery. But Conservative MPs have got to get through to the Prime Minister. This isn't about the Prime Minister. This isn't about Dominic Cummings. It's about the country. It's about the safety and well-being of our people.